Yeah, first time we rolled for initiative in this game, and the Allies picked it up this time. Limited reinforcements, limited cap points, and now kind of there's this question: do you want to pay one or two of those limited caps to bring some French troops into play later, either now or later in the game? It's always, that's going to be a troubling decision. Throw two in now to bring something in immediately. Do I really need the troops now? No. How about one now and bring one in 2 turns? That sounds appealing, to tell you the truth. I feel like I've got enough cap to react. Now I have to launch one attack, though. I still have a mandatory attack, unless I declare the general withdrawal. Declaring the general withdrawal would relieve me of that burden, but I don't feel like I'm being punished all that much by the attacks. So I don't know. This is my victory point hex. I gain victory points as long as I don't declare the withdrawal, as long as I make those attacks. Victory points are valuable. It costs the Germans twice as many to win the main game, the immediate victory. What about the long term? I still have to have twice as many as the Allies have. So every victory point that the Allies get is worth quite a bit to them. I'm not going to be able to get another victory point hex. I don't see any real possibility of that. But I can at least pad my total a little bit more. Make it harder on the Germans to win this game. Even if they take Paris, and if they don't take Paris, they're not gonna collect a lot of victory points from what they historically had. I don't know how much better than historically I can do. They'll get some. We were looking at about what the Allies have, to tell you the truth. Maybe a little bit more than that, but probably not twice as much. So I think I'm going to kick one of these off and drop one of these units 2 turns later. Now this becomes a variable reinforcement. I can push it back at the front. That seems like a sort of mutable goal, or a less, a compromise situation. I'm not throwing everything into troops. I'm not throwing everything into activity. I don't really expect to have to do a lot of activity here. With the initiative, well, I think I'm going to kick off with my initial attack. And beyond that, I'll probably be passing unless something develops. The Germans have a lot of caps here. I want to make sure that I can hold out against whatever they can do. I don't want them, slashing through and doing something exciting here that I have no defense against. Kind of a bummer that victory point just got canceled out, at least for now. This canceled all unfought battles. Initiatives gets surrendered to the non-initiative player. It's just launching the attack here. Does not go, and that means I don't fulfill this. I don't get a victory point. And now I'm pretty low in caps, and I've done nothing this turn. Germans' first activation, the artillery took Maubeuge out of the way. Remember, 1 success means you get more rolls. The actual counters for it, as they reduce, actually got weaker. The defensive garrison went down from a +2 to +1, and we got it. And remember, actually, I only had to get it down to level 1, and then it would have been eliminated by the combined bombardment, if I recall correctly. I think I got it all the way down just rolling. I didn't have to look that up. But even had I taken it, this concentrated bombardment, if I don't eliminate all the forts, I do 1 additional hit. So yeah, if I can get it down to 1, I can eliminate it. And it's always going to take it down a step. Then the battle, well, the cav was used heavily to screen. One British unit was destroyed, which is a shame, and I'm still holding the hex. It's not really a hex I want to be fighting over. I think there's a reasonable chance. I don't know how big a deal it is for the Germans to attack it, to tell you the truth. They want to get control because the rail lines lead down to here, but they already have routes into there. So in a sense, this is the hex they want to be fighting over, not this one. But I don't particularly want to open this up. It's getting kind of tricky. The Allies got hit here again, and they were forced into a counterattack by fortunes of war. They had undisordered units, so they struck. It did not go well. I think I forgot again about the concentric attack bonus. I'm always forgetting that. It's their initiative, and they don't want to do anything, so they're still passing. They just, you know, continually let the Germans do what they can. This is kind of painful because they're going to get, you know, wrapped again there, but there aren't a lot of good options. I could spend an activity to move out. I can't really afford to spend the cap. Maybe I'll do some damage, maybe not. Who knows? As it stands, though, like I said, the Germans don't want to hit here because that opens up this hex to being exploited. So I would have to leave some German troops behind. If I break this hex first, then I can move forward with that hex. Very, very slow, very much like later stages you'd expect in World War I, except the troops aren't strong enough to necessarily hold the line, especially for the Allies. I want to trade space before I don't want to make the withdrawal until I feel I have to. I may have to this turn just if I don't have the extra cap to conduct that attack. I may have to call off the attack. But otherwise, I get to keep my victory points, and then, you know, if I never call the withdrawal, I don't take a penalty for it. The difficulty there is the Germans will never call their withdrawal and will never get to trench warfare within the scope of this game. But, you know, that's an acceptable cost because they don't have to actually ever take it. It's a penalty and victory points for them, too. Again, it's a situational thing. If things look ugly, they may want to take it. The Germans managed to capture the hex, and they also launch an attack into this hex. I had to clean up some of these blocked hex side markers. There's another one that got left behind that no longer apply because there's no longer units in the space that I'm applying them to. But here, this is kind of a bloody battle. We actually got the advantage of an attacker surprise, which got rid of, if there was indeed a defensive bonus to that hex. And of course the concentric attack again, which I usually forget, but I got it in place this time. Basically, both sides took a step loss on every one of their 4 units. There were good things up there, and the Allies rolled reasonably well. The Germans, I think, had automatic hits on everything, basically. Well, except for a 6. And in fact, they used a weaker unit than they could have just because of the bonus of the surprise and the concentric attack combined. This is not a terribly good place to be defending, but it's not really any worse than anywhere else on the line. So, you know, I got a lot of troops there. I might as well keep fighting. This is an important rail net. I remember that from the Der Weltkrieg, and you can kind of see it, the effect that it has on play here. This is what connects here to here if you're not running back here. Now, for the Allies, they have as much rail net as they need. At least, yeah. I mean, all they're really worried about is the rails connect somewhere, somehow. It's the Germans that have trouble, but not grabbing this space with all these rails running through it means it's going to be tough to go, you know, you can't go through here. You can't go past this hex. This hex, well, I'd have that rail, but that doesn't clean up. I don't remember. It's like turn 5, either after turn 5 or through turn 5, or starting with turn 5, that this cleans up, and I can start using this as a rail net. But the attack's not going in that direction. It's all up here in the north right now. In fact, you know, if I'm going to fight an attritional battle, why do it in multiple places? Just keep hitting in one location, and for whatever that's worth. So, I think we're going to take a little break because I'm pretty sure the Allies again are going to pass. The problem with them passing at this point is they lose a victory point. And the Germans don't have all that many caps left, but the Germans can't afford to just throw away a 3-cap holding. They've got to make some ground here. So, you know, if they want to do that, that's fine. I can probably still pass with the Allies. Although I really ought to try to get this sucker out of the way now that there's some parity in terms of the amount of commands. So maybe I'll run that now, and then I'm free to actually pass if the Germans don't. The Allies did so. They pushed their Plan 17 victory points. That's probably as high as they're going to go. Not a great fight for them, but it, you know, it ended up an attritional type thing. Each side loses like 3 steps out of 4 that were engaged. Over here, instead of continuing this fight, the Germans moved into here. They got the cautious attacker thing, which is not necessarily a disadvantage. It allows you to advance into a hex without having to fight, without any advantages going to the defender. But there was nothing to advantage the defender here particularly. This was a desire to kind of push, maybe threaten the San Quentin line back here, which might force the French back another hex to get out of there. That's not happening. We got locked into another combat. Now it's kind of an interesting situation. Can I do anything with these guys? Maybe push a hex to the line up here at St. Paul and see if you know, I can throw kind of a threat in that direction. As it stands already, there's a threat against the Lille hex, but these guys can trace supply back to St. Paul. So there's kind of a... You'd really have to... I'm always noticing, this game, it's very hard for me to tell where I can advance and where I can't because of the control markers. In the Great War, which has a similar sort of, hey, if 2 people are in the hex, you can't move out of it. But there, they don't worry about these blocked hex sides. So there isn't a situation like I control this area and can move into an adjacent area just because no enemy troops have moved through there yet. There's nothing of that nature. So here there's some ability to cut supply lines that just doesn't exist otherwise. Of course, there's multiple routes for the Germans to have supply right now. It's going to be really tough for the Allies to do an attack swift enough that it can cut everything. If they cut to here, Ypres, sorry, we do cut off this little, not this, right? Yeah, if we go here and here, we cut off this whole pocket. That's kind of impressive. Did I open up another bad place? Ah, shit. But here's the problem. The Germans only need 1 line. So if I do a strike through there, German troops from here, which are not in great shape, or from here, could just fall back to Lille and perhaps reset the line. Take this. That would not help these guys, but it would help these guys. So if I'm using these forces, and it's not like I have a lot of mobility on the line. I can't just throw troops all the way across. So it definitely does. I don't think the Allies want to risk that much. I feel pretty comfortable with their position in terms of victory points and ground game. That if I give ground slowly, the Germans aren't going to be able to win this overall game. Big advantage for the Germans now. After the Allies pass, they get to launch their attacks. if they don't succeed, it's no good, but they succeeded here very well, got an attacker surprise result along with the concentric attack here. They again have a concentric attack that I didn't mark. And they got a routed result, which means at the conclusion of the battle, the person with the fewer undisrupted total combat forts is forced to retreat. So it's not going to be the normal victory conditions for a battle. We were in pretty good shape against the normal. The Brits had to put all their units on the line. This is perhaps no worse. I can attack the cav with the cav. What do I want to do with those English troops? Well, I want to put my weaker infantry, get that hit first, and then I'll put this here so that I have an option to shift over. The advantage is still strongly in my favor here. So I'm just gaining that ground and clearing the way for what's really an attack on Paris itself is starting to come into play. Now, I have not gained enough victory point hexes to continue on. I want to get this hex, Amiens, and you know, if I can get part of the river line here, that would help too. I gotta count my hexes, but 26 is gonna be a hard number to get. Let's say it's 2.5 per, think, 4. That sounds like I need about 6 victory point hexes. I've got 1, 2, 3. I might be able to do it. I might be close enough that if I can get Saint-Quentin, it's worth the risk. But here's the problem. Worth the risk? That's my one chance for automatic victory. Then it becomes, geez, you know, I can always hold that 10 points for Paris if I get it, probably. Well, I don't know about that, but maybe I can hold it. But it may be hard to maintain that to obtain a 2-to-1 odds at any other time. And it may be harder to hold on to whatever gains I get. The Allies are going to close things off just by moving a unit up here into Abbeville. I don't think they're going to be... Well, there's mandatory attacks which can come off the chart, so there's still some possibility of that. Now we're at the end, and again, I think we're all in good supply. I'm not going to move this here. It's more valuable here. This is a risky location. This is a victory point hex with lots of defensive terrain. Looks like a great place to hold, but it's just not that important to the overall position of the line. We're going to try to do less detail, but turn 5 is kind of interesting here. That's where we're going in. First of all, 2 of the Fog of War entries have changed to mandated battles. These were the attack in force for the French Plan 17 actions, where you'd have to use disrupted units and get them killed and whatever. We're also going to get, we have the emergency supply, but I'm not worried about that because it's been cleared. But we have the end of RailNet is gonna, this sucker is gonna go away, which means the Germans can then start tracing rails into France using this hex. The resistance goes away. I also threw down some reinforcements. The rolls for caps, not good for the Allies at all. They only got 4. They threw one of them in to another replacement though. Basically they can sit back and let the Germans do things and then react every now and then with a cap if need be. But we're hoping to try to hold this line. Worst comes to worst though, we got the withdrawal option now. And the Germans can't do a withdrawal until we do one. So that's kind of a weird thing in my view. But at least as far as I understand it. I'll look that up to make sure I understand the rule, because I also am glad that I just left this sucker sitting here, because a whole bunch of reinforcements jumped on that hex. There may be more coming. No, the rest are going to come in hex 100, wherever that is down here. But if I had spent a cap on moving that unit, even through strategic movement, I would have had and I don't know if I could. I think strategic movement's limited to within Germany. I could throw it down into Alsace. But we may be up to full strategic movement now. But it would have been a real waste. Now, I do have one problem that I see with the Germans. Is these heavy artillery is what to do with them. Do I start moving them towards Paris in the hope of them being helpful in taking Paris? Or do I shift them down for an attack on the Verdun region? They're very slow. It's going to be hard to get them moving in any direction, to tell you the truth. They can only go one hex per turn. So, and they can't use strategic movement. So it's going to be a long road anywhere they're going. And then it comes down to, hey, which one do I want to do? It's kind of neat tying this game into not so much things like Paths of Glory or some of the higher level games, SPI's World War One, The Great War by Rand, nor particularly to the Western Front, the Weltkrieg, but to La Grande Guerre, because the interaction of the pieces reminds me more of the same level that that game has. Even though that's a full strategic coverage of the war, this actually feels not too different from it in terms of the size of the units that you're moving. It tends to be a big stack, a whole army at once moving. And in terms of but also in terms of the fact that they're support units. I have to deal with these heavy artillery and how to get them, moved. The hex size isn't that different either, to tell you the truth. This is kind of like a little, I think there's a few more hexes covering this area, but this is like a little slice of La Grande Guerre. Just imagine trying to play, say, a campaign game on this scale. And what that would be like, as opposed to, say, the Der Weltkrieg type series, which obviously is a full operational game. And I think that gives you some of the idea. This is a little bit more detail, but it's very appealing, the thought of using this kind of size. Not these huge hexes, but something using this kind of system over the whole war. I'm so far very intrigued by this system, actually. Largely in a period in the game where the Allies really don't get any chance to attack, at least if their die rolls come out crappy. Anyway, Germans pushed into this hex. They can't go much further. I have to take St. Quentin to get the rail line right here into my control. They also moved the Army of the Nord into place here. Now I have a strong point there. I was really worried about the weakness that I had there. Well, that weakness is gone. I don't think I've taken this hex. That's kind of troublesome, because that might be a useful connection if the French could manage any kind of offensive. Right now they haven't been managing it. I split my artillery, sent half of it into Cambrai, moving towards Paris. That one gun can probably take Paris down with a few attacks. And so I'm then dispatching the heavier gun, which is going to have a harder time no matter what, because Verdun is so strong towards the Verdunese forts and the forts in the south. A couple quick rounds of combat down here at St. Quentin. And first one coming in, we got attacker surprise, which doesn't really help. And of course, I forgot about the concentric attack. The second one ended up as a skirmish. And that went poorly for the Germans. So they really need to budge this, is my view. Now that they've damaged the enemy, they need to get it moving. But now the enemy gets his chance to react, essentially. Now, if I'm correct, you cannot rebuild your replacement points. Not replacements. Whatever it is. The improvement of units without, as long as there are enemy forces in your hex. I believe I looked that up. And that kind of takes away, the Allies had to throw a point in to get the skirmish. They got it through the Event 7, the tactical advantage. And it seemed like that's the best way of holding things off. I mean, I was looking at, start positioning myself for an attack here. No, I committed. Once I made that attack, I've got to try to push there. I can't start doing subsidiary attacks here. Now, here's what's weird is that that kind of conflict, low-grade conflict, and maybe that's what why you can't expend caps to recover units. That's going on all along. These attacks are not limited to one hex. But on the other hand, the big push, the concentration of forces tended to be in one geographic locality because that's the only place you could throw enough men and munitions into place to really get things shoved the way you need to. And I think any decent World War I game actually kind of covers that pretty well. One potential exception to that is SPI's World War I, where the scale and the scope of the time frame is such that turns are like a season, I think, or half a year, where multiple attacks are happening across the board. It's not just these single offensives in small locality, maybe supported across the board, but primarily focused in one locality. But Paths of Glory, this Der Weltkrieg, to a lesser extent. There is some capability for an across-the-line assault in Der Weltkrieg, although your capacity to actually launch that is often difficult. And in fact, I find that some of the games seem to abstract that away too much, but that's a more, the ability, the fact that some of these assaults actually were all along the front, but with a focus in one area. The fact that that game is more detailed than anything else I have on the subject matter, including this, which is a smaller slice of the war, I think justifies that would be handled that way. So these give kind of that big picture view of where you're making that big push and abstract away any of the other combats that are going on. It feels a little funny, though, that there's not real contact with the enemy everywhere, that there's no real reason to throw troops in along the line, trench to trench, or in direct engagement across the board. Although that's less that happens less in 1914 than later. So if you wanted to extend this game to this system to another part of the war where it's less mobile, well, we'll see how that bogs down towards the end as we get toward the last few turns when I expect the trench warfare should have taken real. Ended up one hell of a bloody battle here. The Allies really got waxed. Another skirmish round happened, and again, not much happening, but a weakening of the Allied forces. But then the next round, counterattack came up, which meant they were on the offensive. They have to commit their troops to hit the Germans, and that was much, much uglier. And because of how ugly that was, they ended up losing 3 kind of disorganized units that they maybe wouldn't have, well, who knows? The skirmishes were keeping them alive just fine, but I didn't want to withdraw. That's another victory point hex, and now the German army is in place here, and it probably isn't strong enough to get here. The question, though, is I can't hold this hex with what I've got, so I'm going to spend my final cap, and that leaves a ton of caps for the Germans, though, to upgrade my force. I may have to withdraw. That doesn't get upgraded. Not until then. If the Germans are able to say, well, there's no way they can get here because of the rail nets. They're going to have to launch attacks elsewhere if that's the case. But if the Germans are able to punch a hole in the line, say here, which is quite possible, here, which is almost impossible, or maybe here, which looks quite likely. This is kind of problematic because I can't move 2 hexes there. These guys have a 2 movement. That will get them 1 hex. Even if I commit the army, I only get 1 more movement point. That's not enough to get through those forests. Most of my headquarters are good enough to do it, but not those guys. Anyway, if the Germans are able to stretch that Allied line a little bit more, I may have to call the general retreat to maintain any semblance of a line, just to be able to pull some of this stuff back more easily. Because right now I have no movement because I have no caps. Germans actually spent both their actions moving the Army of the Nord into place here at Mezieres, and that may have been an overly expensive thing, but I didn't want to push this way and leave a gap here in somewhat richer terrain. There's a gap here. I don't think the French dare exploit that, and they don't have the caps for it. I got one more action. This is perhaps the most appealing place, but that's basically an even-on attack going in there, with both of us likely to get damaged. And I don't really see what I gain from it, because he's going to have a +2 to his. Actually, no, he puts a +2 on me, which means got a chance. I'd say, I don't know, about a 1/3 chance of getting in there for free. Anywhere else I can do something? This big stack is all disordered. I could have recovered it for a point earlier to keep rolling, which is the one reason why Soissons seems important, because I could really get some leverage on the flanks even if I can't push forward because of the rail net with a big army there. But I sure as hell don't want to hit Sedan or any of these others here. I don't see any advantage to doing that. I think I'm going to trigger this and see whether or not I can get success. The result was an attacker surprise check, and this is awesome because this is my rail line moving down. The only problem is I don't really have the force to put into Amiens to take it, and I do need it. But it's another victory point hex. It's a heavy defensive hex. It's getting me close to Paris, so I can force the withdrawal. Even if the Allies don't want to do it, they have to do it if I get in here. Now we recover, and I think everything's in supply, so it's just really a question here if a lot of Germans took hits, which I don't think they did. These guys are going to finish up their recovery. And we'll move to a somewhat more equitable distribution of caps this turn. I don't know how much that means, but it means the Germans kind of have to worry about the possibility of the Allies reserving caps. The Germans have to keep doing things to keep the game moving. The Allies don't, and they could hold a bunch of caps off. Now, however, holding a bunch doesn't make a lot of sense when I can throw some units on the reinforcement track. I think 3 is a good number. That gives me a decent amount of flexibility, and I get 2 of my big French units back on the board. I'm not going to bring all 3 back on. That seems excessive, although tempting. The other one's a little smaller. If I don't take many losses this turn, it'll come in. On the German side, they get a reinforcement unit, this detachment command. This replaced a German headquarters, which I threw over here, which comes in the next turn after. This is an optional reinforcement in the sense that the Germans could refuse it if they really need their army headquarters on the board. But I don't see this thing moving very fast. I don't see it using its headquarters ability, and the detachment's fine for that, for me to do that. I'm not sure that I terribly need another headquarters. I'm pretty happy with the armies I have fielded. In terms of anywhere I have stacks of units, I feel like I have a headquarters, except maybe here, but there is nothing launching out of there. Anything else here? Yeah, I think that's it. The Germans haven't had to replace units yet. They've taken very little losses, so they don't have that drain on their resources in play. I see one possible weirdness here where the Germans could slip through, capture Dieppe, and take Rouen, and I mean, they don't want to. They want the victory points, but they don't really want to cut themselves off here. If I had more reserves to push around that way, that would be very, very tempting, because Paris is close to being in danger here. And what else? Well, I don't know. We'll figure out what the Germans are going to do, because it's not their turn, actually. The Allies have the initiative this time. The Allies are probably going to punt, though. I don't see them doing much. They got a couple of reinforcements on the board in Amiens and Soissons that will help them hold the line, I hope. So thinking about the victory point hexes, in particular the double ones, which it ends up are, geez, Verdun. And these aren't noted on the map in any special way. They just have the regular victory point marker. They're not distinguished from the others. And the other one is the Toul Nancy hex down here, is a 2 victory point one. I was curious, gee, do I have an extra? You know, am I sitting on a double victory point, or is there one I can aim for to get? I discovered something. They left the Antwerp victory point hex off, so I quickly drew that on the map. I gotta get somewhere or another. I have a red Sharpie that I can use. I was confused and call them scriptos, which is the translucency pens, but somewhere I have one, and I'd like to mark that in place. And I'd also probably put some kind of marking for the double victory points that aren't on the play, that aren't in play already. Anyway, that's all we got for that. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the Germans. Again, the Allies are going to punt and give the Germans the initiative here. German attacks were targeted at Kherson. They took it. They had to do 2 attacks to do it. The first one was just a skirmish, but they broke the French and drove them back to Reims. And there's a lot of victory points down this way too. So, you know, 2 routes into Paris, either one will give me points, but this way is looking very weak. Here, I need to advance into here to get that advance. I feel like I need this advance. I almost feel like I need a double move. A move to slam this way, and then a second move to push in at least to here, and probably all the way into Soissons. Keeping that range there. I don't really want to force the Allied withdrawal. I'm not sure why. Until it's time, sort of. Make them make their choice when their choice comes. They can do it whenever they like, but in a way they don't want to waste. For the Allies, they don't want to do it before they need to. And right now, though, we're seeing a hole in their line here. How dangerous is this? Well, it's real. Unfortunately, if I can't take the Sedan, I don't know how much this really helps, because I've got the rail net running back this way. You know, if I had infinite amounts of German troops, yeah, I could crack through it, but this game is not like that. You don't have that kind of superiority over your enemy. You could throw an army down that way, but then what do you got on your line, on your main axis of advance that you were planning? So the Germans pushed into Soissons, and leaving forces back here at Saint-Quentin. The first result was one of the skirmish options. I burned my last cap for the Allies for that. That prevented pretty much any effect. The second result was a normal battle using the TEM this time. And, well, the Allies are weakening. There's no question that they're beginning to fall back, but they gained a cap from it. By the way, the Germans got a mandatory attack, which is, they pretty much were guaranteed to use. It's the Allies at this point, they really don't want one. That's either a victory point penalty or an attack that, you know, maybe someplace like this, that's just going to burn a cap point, which is the most likely to happen. Now it's the Allied action phase. I've got a point. I had restored things here at Reims, which is why I didn't, well, one reason why I didn't push. Numbers were another. This is not a valuable space, but it's getting me closer and closer to really vital spaces for me. I need to advance towards Paris, and we're beginning to get the flattening out. That's no longer really the Schlieffen plan, no longer that single force punching through. And I think that's where I'm going wrong with the Germans, is I'm not getting traction because, I'm trying to do it on the whole front, and you can't do that in this game. Question, of course, is do the Allies want to do something? There's some potential weaknesses to the German line. Up here in the north, they're very weak. There's not terribly much there that I want to hit. I don't really want to commit my forces to that. If I take St. Paul, that doesn't do me any good. The rail net's cut both ways. And I can't really just keep thrusting into that. That's going to get my forces cut off. There's no question. I've got this gap here that I got to worry about. If there were more German forces, they'd be pushing through. But I've got a hell of a big army here that I could get moving into Kherson. That could do me some significant good. Not the whole thing. I need some of it to defend against these guys, but I don't need to have that big a force positioned there. I also don't need that big a force positioned here, probably. Do I want to spend an activation on this? I think so. I think the Allies are going to launch an attack. And we end the German turn with a push again through the Mézières to Rethel. One cav escaped from there. Hard choice where to put it. Definitely not here, but Chalon, well, that's not really a key tactical location in terms of what's going on in the move. It's worth victory points. I'd like it, but the real danger that I have, see, there's two dangers, really. One is getting this move against Paris from the south this time. The other, though, is penetrating between the two French lines. At this point, the French are in a lot of trouble. I could declare the general withdrawal right now, or I could declare it next turn. It looks like I'm going to have to do it just to keep my line at all contiguous. But I don't know, maybe I can dispatch these units down here, count on Verdun to try to hold out for a while, or maybe leave some strength behind as I try to stretch that out, and just use a cap to do that. I'm out right now and there's not much I can do. I got pushed out of the way. I think everything's still in supply. I haven't destroyed the French supply lines. That's almost impossible unless you cut them off doing something stupid like pushing into Belgium or something. But yeah, Paris is not going to be easy to take. So anyway, everything's going to recover and we'll push on into turn 7. I think I'll try to load this video up as it is.